Good morning, everyone. I'm Bridget Pirinea, and we're here today in Contour Mortgage Studios. And I have with me Charlie Sikorski, my partner, as well as Edgar Zephyrin. And Edgar is a friend of ours. Actually, he's hopefully a satisfied customer.
Yeah.
But the reason why he's here today is because he is an inspector and an engineer. And he actually is also a professor of engineering at City University. Yep. So he's well qualified to speak about home inspections. And what we're trying to do in this forum is give buyers as much information as we can when they purchase a home. So Edgar, welcome.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for coming.
Thank you for coming.
We appreciate your trip. So let's talk a little bit about home inspections and why they're so important when purchasing a home. Obviously, you know, you're making a major investment.
Yes.
So a home inspection is really an important thing for a buyer to do.
Absolutely.
So tell us some of the things that are performed during a home inspection and what they reveal.
Right. So just to allude to what you said, this will be like the largest investment that a normal person will make throughout their life.
Right.
So, it can be scary, can be overwhelming. So it's my job, you know, just to kind of put them at ease sometimes, hopefully best case scenario, so that they won't have any surprises once they purchase the home and something goes wrong, their boiler blows out and they have to spend $20,000, they weren't aware of that. So it's my job just to give them a heads up, you know, to say, hey, this boiler is aged, or the windows you may need to replace in the near future. So those are just some of the items that we inspect during the home inspection.
Right.
Right. So some of those, most of the items are the structure. You have the foundation of the home.
Right.
The roof, right? The roof is another part of the structure that a lot of people just call it the roof, but the roof is the structure as well.
Right.
It's just designed to carry certain different loads, such as
Right.
snow and wind, where the foundation is meant to carry the weight of the whole home.
Right.
So just those items, you know, I just try to inspect everything thoroughly so they have no surprises, and you know, and hopefully all goes well.
When you do the home inspection, are the buyers there with you, or
99% of the times they are. I kind of prefer that they are there, so just in case there's something that won't be that lucid in the report, I can show it to them. So here, I'm going to point this out in the report, here's how I'm going to explain it, and I can also show them. So a lot of times they are, most times they can't make it because of work and other things like that. So
But you would recommend that they
I do,
attend?
always, yes, absolutely.
Do you also inspect as part of it if a house has a central air unit? Do you
Yes.
review that as well?
Yes, that's part of the HVAC units, right?
Right.
So we inspect the plumbing as well as the heating and cooling system. So you have, most modern homes have those central units where it does both the heating and cooling. Some just have heating.
Right.
Right.
Some have a boiler. They just have the outdoor unit that does separate cooling. You know,
Right.
older technologies.
Right.
But yeah, I inspect all those. I give them like an estimated life expectancy on those items. We have the model numbers. We take a lot of photos and, you know, just try to make them aware of the unit and its
Right.
operating condition.
We talk about it with buyers. A lot of times buyers get a little frightened with home inspections and
Right.
what they reveal,
Yeah.
right? And of
Yeah.
course, anything major needs to be addressed.
Right.
But I also explain to buyers when they come to us and they ask us about it, right?
Right.
That you're not buying a new home.
Exactly.
You're buying a home that has some age, and
Right.
it's to be expected, right?
Absolutely,
To
right.
have to do some repairs. As long as anything isn't major.
Exactly. Like it's easy to see peeling paint, you know, but beyond the boil, like moisture damage or if something is leaking, I always try to explain to folks that the solution will never be bigger than the problem, right? The problem,
Right.
so, you know, you go in, I use certain language. I don't try to scare them off. There's certain
Right.
things you just explain it to them. Okay, here's the problem, and here's how we solve that problem.
Right.
Right.
It's not always a deal breaker. It just could be something minor that looks major,
Right.
and vice versa. Right.
Right. Do you also give, when you do home inspections, do you also give the buyer an indicator of what it would cost to repair the issue?
They would sometimes ask. I typically don't include that in the report because
Okay.
I just give the condition. But that's why I prefer the potential buyer to be there.
Right.
Because if they ask the question, then you know I always have a follow-up phone call with them, and if they have questions, I explain how much does something like this cost, and then I would provide a range.
Right.
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 If need be.
Do most people try, when you interact with a buyer, do most people try and use it as a negotiating point the
lot of time.
inspection report. I mean, in the environment that we've been in,
Yeah,
right? That
especially.
they haven't been able to do that.
Exactly.
But
Right.
do you feel that most people try and use that as a negotiating
Absolutely.
point?
I feel like they say, well, how much could I get off of this? Or
Yeah.
notate that. I'm saying, okay, but I can only notate what I find. I can't put
Right.
anything geared towards a.
But then
a
again,
monetary
that's not the
incentive.
point of doing an
That's
inspection.
right.
You know,
Exactly.
that's what
Absolutely.
your attorney.
Exactly.
needs
Just to
to
make
be-
you aware of the
Right.
conditions,
Right.
and then you meet with your attorney. Then you guys sit and strategize. But
Right.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I always try to explain that this is not a negotiation tool. This
Right.
is an inspection report.
Now, sometimes we run into a question, you know, somebody will say to us, well, I had the home inspection done. Now, the home inspection isn't an appraisal of the property.
Right.
You're not giving a value on the property. You're,
Exactly. Right. So the home appraiser typically really works for the bank, I would say. Right. He wants
Yes.
to make sure that that home is worth the loan that the customer will receive to purchase the home. Right. The mortgage.
Right.
The home inspector works for the potential buyer.
Right.
I'm trying to make them aware of their purchases. So
Right.
that's the difference between the two. I don't work for the bank. If they buy the home, if they don't buy the home, it's totally up to them. I'm not pushing them to buy or don't. So
Right.
it's really
Right. Yeah, the appraisal process is really used to establish market value.
Right.
Whereas the inspection process looks at the structural integrity
yes,
of the home
absolutely.
and to make sure that, you know, your home is in decent shape, what
Right.
you're buying is not going to fall down around you.
open the door up and.
I've had
Yeah.
clients, they have asked me, well, do you also do the home appraisal? I said, that's like a conflict of interest. I can't
No,
do
no,
that."
no.
That's
No.
I'm on your side more,
No.
yes.
Right.
You taught us something once in one of the Zoom calls during
Oh,
COVID
yeah.
that we had done. You taught me something that I didn't know. I don't know if you knew about it, Charlie.
No, I
And
didn't. I
we
didn't
talked
actually.
we talked about foundation cracks,
Cracks,
because
Yeah.
right.
that comes up all the
Right.
time.
Right.
And I remember asking you what was worse, a horizontal crack or a vertical crack?
Right.
And you told me I was wrong. And so why don't you explain that and tell me what
Sure.
is the worst type of a crack?
Well, you
foundation
have the
crack?
vertical cracks. Those are settling cracks. Those are pretty typical. A lot of times when you have a home and you have a foundation, you have something called mortar that they place over the center block, just to make
Okay.
it, just give it like a most aesthetically pleasing look. So those, you will always have your vertical cracks. It's just settling cracks.
Okay.
Right.
But what you should be cognizant of, or what should start to scare you a little bit, is when you see those stair line type cracks. That's when you have settling issues. That's when a
Right.
home is some
So
type
it's
of
like
twist.
this?
Shifting
Yeah, so
could
yes,
possibly.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. The home
So
has
it's
to
a
move somewhere.
diagonal
Yes.
when you have a diagonal line.
Yes, that's when you should break.
And
But
you-
there's,
No, it's interesting because after we had that conversation and you told us
I
what
went
we
right
should
in my
look at,
basement, started looking around, you know, and the walls I could see. So.
Right.
but after you made us aware of that, I started asking people, do you
Yeah.
know what's worse?
Yeah.
And, you know, a horizontal crack or a
Let
vertical
me
crack,
let me guess. Most people didn't know, right, Bridget?
no one knew.
Yeah. They
No
just see a
one
crack, yeah, and say, uh-oh,
But
this is
that's
bad.
what, so you always learn, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Right.
it's a great thing. It's important
It
thing
is,
for
and then-
people to know.
Absolutely, and then there's also a remedy, because a lot of times if you have it, because we go by the distance between the cracks. So if
Okay.
there's if there's certain separation, there's just a spray foam concrete that you put in there, and it expands out, and it is sealed.
Right.
So it's not terrible if you see that.
Right.
It's just a remedy for it that you have to take care of sooner than later.
So, you know, it's funny when buyers come or buyers get inspection reports, they get panicked by things. But
Right.
when a professional comes in
Right.
and he says, well, there's a remedy,
Yeah.
it
Oh.
kind of gives you confidence because
Right.
people, we don't know that
Right.
there's
I'll
a
tell 'em.
potential remedy
Well,
for all of these things.
it's assuring to know that
It is
when
reassuring.
when you're sitting down with somebody or standing there with them and going through this, you're actually explaining to them that this can be fixed.
Absolutely right.
Right.
You
The
know.
solution is never bigger than the problem. Don't worry.
That's
That's-
it.
I'm gonna
That's
remember
it. Well,
that
that's a
tonight.
good one.
Right,
The
yeah,
solution
yeah.
is never should never be bigger
Yeah,
than
don't
the
panic.
problem.
Right.
Yeah, don't panic.
And then read the report. Don't just
And read it.
Right.
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 But I
Extremely
think you
important.
brought out a very important point. I think most buyers should attend
Absolutely.
that home
Yeah.
inspection because what it really does
Always recommend.
will help them to really understand
Yes.
what it is that you're putting in that report.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I always encourage them to
Mm-hmm.
at least be present or send someone whom you trust
Right.
Right.
who can explain it to you in that same language.
Right.
Right.
Right. What advice would you give to sellers when they're
Right.
selling? I mean, I realize
Right.
you're not a realtor, but
Right.
you could probably offer some solid advice to people when
Right.
they're looking to put their house on the
Right.
market, right?
Absolutely.
What should you try and take care of?
Very
What
good
should
question. Very good question. So I had one seller who he was selling his home, and he came to me after the fact, after he had like an accepted offer. They had a home inspector, and it was an item that needed repair, and he wanted me to come in and take a look at it and try to provide him with a solution. And I explained to him, if you would have had a home inspector first, right,
Right.
then I could have presented you with the report, and I could have told you all the items that the other inspector is going to bring up. So I
Right.
always recommend that. If you're selling a home, have an inspector before you sell it. That
Right.
way
Right.
there are no surprises. I think the negotiation will go much quicker. There'll be less takeaways, you know.
Right.
But I don't know. So a lot of people, when
Do
they
people-
sell, they're ready to sell. Right?
Right,
Right.
right. But I think that's important.
Extremely
And
important.
it's, look, no one wants to buy a house with deficiencies,
Right.
right? And like we said, a lot of buyers think that they could use it as a negotiating tool,
Yeah.
which
Right.
maybe they can't.
Right.
And I guess if it's anything major, major things, I guess you can use as a negotiating tool. But
Right.
minor stuff,
It's not
it's
gonna,
really, it's
on
not
a
going
nickel
to
and
affect
dime.
it.
$5 here is not. You have a
Right.
$500,000
Yeah.
home. You want to take off $30? It's not-
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
How about heating systems?
Heating systems. Well, there's different types. You have the boiler, you have a furnace, and then you
Right.
have electric. I
Okay.
had one guy who purchased a home. He was a friend of mine,
Okay.
and the first home he was going to buy, we saw something terrible. This was out. It was a sandy home, and the
Oh,
house had actually, you could see it.
shifted.
It shifted,
Shifted,
right.
right.
So I believe that the buyer, they had fixed the home, but they didn't fix the foundation. They just took care of the outside, just the aesthetics. So they put a fancy thermostat and new siding. I said, that's fine. This is a beautiful home, but this foundation is not good. So that's a negotiating point where you have to come and you have to have a structural engineer come and you have to provide a solution for that.
Right.
Right. That house he didn't go through with. So then he went to another home. I didn't forget about the heating question, Charlie.
Yeah. No. It's okay. It's okay.
So another home he went to buy, I wasn't with him this time. So he bought the home, and then he said, I don't have I have electric hot water heater,
Okay.
and I have baseboards everywhere that has separate thermostats.
Okay.
I said, it's the heating system. I said, well, it's not the most efficient system in the world. Plus, that's all electric,
Right.
And he wasn't aware of that. He was trying to find his boiler. He thought it was in the closet somewhere. And I said, no, that's your heating system there. So he had baseboards everywhere in each individual room. And each time he wanted to heat up that room, he had to go turn on that thermostat.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't a really
That
efficient
wasn't,
system.
Yeah.
no.
He eventually got rid of it now. I designed a split system for him. It does both heating and cooling, so that takes care of him during the summer and winter time, and now he's happy.
Well, that's
But he did have to remove the baseboard, so
Right.
this wasn't very
And
efficient.
how much would something like that cost if you had to convert it? Just out of
I
curiosity.
think he paid $15,000.
Oh,
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
it's-
For,
yeah. Well, no, it's not bad because I need a new heating system in my house, and
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
somebody come in, and it's not. That's just about where things are.
Yeah.
It's not that.
it's nice.
I'm seeing more and more in open houses for cooling systems, air conditioning systems, those units that.
The split system.
Walmart, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Those are it. It's so efficient nowadays because it
Right.
does both heating and cooling, and even though it's electric, because they're trying to eliminate the gas services coming to these buildings. We have to be carbon emission free. But I think 2026 they want to eliminate it. So new construction buildings will not be able to have gas. It's going to be electric.
Right.
That's what's
Wow.
coming. So.
And that's really I think for people on Long Island,
Right.
the
Yeah.
high utility rates.
Yes.
That's
It is. That's why I always recommend solar panels. Because if you have solar panels, I did solar like 6 months after I had purchased my home. I did solar. Yeah.
Really?
So I think my electric bill now is $16, but I have like a solar bill, but it's still much less.
Right.
So now when I run my split unit, that's energy efficient. So everything is tied back to the electric, and I have an efficient system. So it
that's
really lowers
great.
my utility cost a great deal. Yeah.
What do you think of the new heating systems that are actually wall mounted? They're the European, I understand they were
Right.
big in Europe, and now they're here for about 20 years. The
Yeah.
wall-mounted systems, especially for people who live near the water.
Yes.
So you don't have, with Hurricane Sandy, right? So you
Yes.
don't have that risk to your heating system.
Right.
What, and I understand they're supposed to be really energy efficient. They're pretty
They are.
expensive,
Right.
but
Yeah.
what do you think about those units?
That's the same technology as the heat pump units that I had explained. It's the same
Oh,
technology.
really?
It's just different type of mounting options. You can have it in the ceiling, over the door, on the wall.
Right.
It's all VRF, and the good part about it is that it's not a ducted system. So you just
No,
have
it's not.
refrigerant piping. So
Right,
Yeah.
right.
it's really nice.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see a lot of those nowadays.
Right,
Now
and
is-
they vent out. They vent out directly out of the wall of your home,
Yeah.
so it makes chimneys obsolete.
Yes. Yep.
Who knew?
Yeah.
A question for you, because this just popped into my mind. I remember we did a transaction where they had plug-ins for
Oh,
heating.
that was, yeah.
Now, is
Oh.
there something that you look at?
Well, that was Edgar. I think that's what you said. They had to be removed.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Right. So the plug-ins, were they portable or they were stationary? They were.
They were mounted, but
They
they
were
were plugged into the
stationary.
wall.
Yeah. Those are obsolete
bad.
nowadays. Yes. Those
Obsolete.
could be fire hazards. And,
Right.
Right.
so, yeah, so
We
those
had to have those had to be dealt with. They had
Yeah.
to be dealt with
Yeah.
before we would close. I guess because of the fire
are-
hazard
Right.
issue.
Anything plug-in nowadays, they try to eliminate.
Right.
Uh-huh.
If anything, if you see anything hardwired, that's better.
Right.
Okay.
You have to plug in the chance of a
Right.
spark, and
Mhm.
you have to have special grade receptacles for that, because spark proof. So
Right.
you put it out, it doesn't spark as much, and you have
Right.
tamper-proof receptacles. So there are a lot of things that go into those plug-in units. That's why
Right.
they stopped using them. Right.
Right.
Now, you had mentioned before with Sandy, which brings us to a big topic, mold.
Mhm.
We hear
Right.
about, mold and what do you look for? I know we had a whole class one time on mold. I think
Right.
you even were discussing that in that web
Right.
presentation that you did, which was phenomenal. I remember we got so many good reviews
Right.
on it. And there's a lot of different types of mold, right?
There is.
Yeah.
So, well, mold, when I'm performing a home inspection, I'm not allowed to say mold per se. I have to say fungus.
Oh,
Fungus.
okay.
Right,
Okay.
fungus. So that basically starts to occur when you have moisture inside your home, which a lot of basements, you have to have moisture, right? Because if you're in the dirt, your walls, moisture is going to get in, right? So that's
Correct.
why I always have a moisture reader. And there's a section in the report that says indication of moisture, you have to say yes. So the way that you can mitigate that is you can install a dehumidifier there.
Right.
And that will start to keep the moisture out of that space, right? So how do you mitigate that? You really have to put like a dehumidifier there. You want to keep moisture out of the basement, which is a tough job because it's surrounded by dirt, which holds moisture,
Right.
Right.
right? So that's one of the things they can do is put a dehumidifier down there and hope for the best. And, but I do check for that, and I will notate it as a fungus type substance located on such and such wall or the door.
Right.
But that typically happens when you have a flood, and then you can see like a flood line somewhere,
Right.
and then you'll see moisture start to build inside the home.
What about, we hear so much about black mold and how
Right.
dangerous that is.
Yes.
And
yes.
what's done for that? I know in the mortgage industry you have to have a mold remediation done.
Yes.
Right.
That's what I would also recommend when you see black mold, because then that gets dangerous.
Right, it is
That gets
dangerous.
So that's what happens when you don't remediate the situation and you let it get worse and worse. Then it turns into that black type mold.
And the remediation involves what, like pulling down plasterboard
They
and
have
stuff
to,
like
yes,
that?
they have to tape off the room. They have to do an air quality test to make sure that the air is
Oh.
breathable and things of that nature.
So
when
that
it's- when
really
it's done
gets
correctly.
involved.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's probably something you need to look out for in a
Yes.
home inspection, more so
Absolutely.
than, an outlet that's bad.
Absolutely. Right.
That's kind of a
Absolutely.
major thing.
Yes. I would.
What other things that we haven't talked about do you think are important to look for buyers or sellers to take into consideration?
I think we mentioned windows. Windows is a costly item. It's a
Yeah.
costly item. Well, everything nowadays costs a lot.
That's right.
But the windows only because that it's like the largest hole that will be in your home, right? And that would allow heat to come in, right, and heat to leave,
Right.
right? So you can have the best boiler system in the world, but if you have bad windows, that cold air will always find its way in, and it's going to find its way in, and it's going to make your home drafty, and then you have to crank up your boiler even more to try to compensate for those losses that you're experiencing at the windows. Right?
Right.
So you have to really look at the windows as well. I think
So-
we spoke on the structure, we all spoke on the roof, but the windows are the item.
The windows are important too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Drafty windows never help anybody.
Right, and you want to keep your boiler running and running and running. That's going to cost you more
Right,
from an energy perspective. So
right.
it really helps.
And what about these tankless water heaters? I know they're part of these wall-mounted systems have tankless units, but what do you think about those? Like the
Those are
on-demand heating, you like those?
Those
You
are
think
great.
those
The
are good?
tankless, yes, you have to. I think they call those combustible boilers now. That does both the heating and the hot water heating.
Right.
The heating and the hot water
Right.
systems, right?
Right.
Right.
So it
They're
does
combined.
one. So it actually takes the losses that you would experience from a boiler, and it use those losses to heat up the hot water. So it's like a win-win-win-win.
It's a great thing.
Yeah,
It's a great
yeah,
thing.
It is. A lot of new technologies, right?
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about it. You can
Yes.
do so many new things, but the minute you do something,
Right.
there's built-in obsolescence to all
Yes.
of this because
Right.
something new comes out of it,
Right.
you know, which is really great. One thing that happens that we do see is septic issues,
Right.
leaking oil tank issues.
Yeah.
Those have come up on some of the mortgages that we've done.
Wow.
Yeah, that required a great deal of,
Yes.
you
we
know,
have to remove it.
remediation. You know, soil tests will be needed and
Yeah.
things like that.
Do they check the septic? Not to interrupt you,
Yeah.
Bridge, but a question you
I wanted
mentioned
to
on
talk-
septic.
yeah.
We do take a look at. We have to identify the system. And have a septic. We have to identify the sewer system.
Okay.
Oh.
Either it's
Okay.
going to go to the city, or you're going to have your own, and that's a septic or a cesspool.
Right.
And there are ways to see if that's overflowing or if there's any type of deficiency. There's always signs
But you
of
can
that.
you can
Right.
see that.
When you flush the toilets, you can see how the velocity of water is going down. If it's somewhat stagnant, and you see backflow, you know that.
That's an
could have-
indicator then
Your septic is
that
going
you
bad.
have an issue.
Yes.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
The septic is. I will always recommend a potential buyer to have someone check out the septic system, because that's like a separate inspection. They have to
Right.
dig, and they have to take the covers off, or they could ask from the seller to provide documentation of when the septic was last serviced, because
Oh,
it's typically
okay.
5 years where you have to.
That's
have it
great
certified.
advice right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I would always recommend that. I always tell them that. It's also notated in my reports that, hey, you should have someone, or you should have someone check the septic system, or you should have documentation from the owner. And that's for all devices, all appliances. Like if they have a new roof, obtain that warranty from the roof, because it's good for 10 years. So make sure that that's transferable over to you.
So that's good advice for buyers
Yeah.
as well, to
Yeah.
get
Two
all
right
of
there.
that
Absolutely.
all
Yeah.
of that information. You know, some of the mortgages we do actually require an inserted camera
Yes.
into a septic system to make sure that it's operating well. Stony Main mortgages require that. So
Yeah.
that's good for them to know that.
Absolutely.
I think a great tip though is getting that documentation.
Absolutely.
A
That's
lot of great
really-
tips today.
For all
from-
Yes.
appliances, right?
Yeah.
You know?
But
That's-
it's something you might not think about, but
Right.
it's so
No.
important. It really
Right.
is.
Really.
Why don't you tell us where people can find you and your website and
Sure.
and Bridget was saying that you're also a professor
Yes.
as
Yeah.
well, which
I'm
is
an adjunct professor, yes.
Yeah.
So I have my engineering firm, EJZ Engineering.
okay.
That's where
EJZ Engineering, guys. Okay.
Yeah. That's where I do like a lot of commercial buildings, residential,
Right.
MEP designs.
Yeah.
So I have a
So
firm
you do
understanding of the
everything.
mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. That's how I have to stay abreast to all those new technologies,
Right.
right? And then I have my home inspection business, like PE and RA Home Inspectors,
Okay.
right? I'm located in Long Island City. I also have a website for PERA Home Inspectors, like PERAHomeinspectors.com. That's my website. You'll see a lot of testimonies there. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Well, we want to tell our viewers if you are purchasing a home, or when you're ready to purchase a home, this is the man right here.
That's right.
Yeah, he does a great
Brought
job.
a lot of information to us,
Thank you.
and we continue to be educated by him. And
Right.
I
Right.
think that professor is where really stands out. So
He has to keep abreast of
yeah,
everything.
that's for sure.
Yes,
That's for
definitely.
sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So thank you so much. We
Thank
know
you
your
guys so
time
much
is
for having me.
valuable. We know you have all these businesses and all this work that you do.
Well,
But we
thank you for
really
coming in.
appreciate you spending this time with us. And I think that it was valuable for our viewers as
Oh,
well. You know,
of course,
this is a great
sure.
forum to be able to just push out some information.
Yeah, thank you
And
for having me.
you certainly gave us a lot. So
Right.
we thank you.
Thank you.
And we would love to have you back in our Contour Lounge, and when we do some home buying training and
Right.
introduce you, I'm sure maybe you could give a little class to our new buyers that are coming in.
I look forward to it.
It'd be
Absolutely.
helpful.
Absolutely.
It'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Edgar, what are 5 tips that you can give a buyer when they're purchasing a home?
Right. So I would always advise them just to go around, take a look at the home, right?
Okay.
Independent of the home inspector, right? Take a look at it, and there's 5 things that you could visually observe that you don't have to have the trained eye for, right? If something looks wrong, a lot of times there's something wrong.
Right.
And that's the roof system, right? If you see lifted shingles or you see missing shingles, that's a big indicator that the roof may need to be changed in the near future. The second one will be the foundation of the home, the obstruction, right? If you see those diagonal cracks, that's typically an indication that there was some type of movement in the home, in the foundation of the home. The third would be the heating system, boiler, right? Check and see if there's any rust around the boiler, right? Check and just quick check around, make sure everything looks nice and clean. Most of the time, never happens, right? The fourth one would be the age of the home, right?
Okay.
The age of the home has effect on a lot of things. The type of substrates used to build the home, the type of materials, right? The type of foundation, right? We
Right.
have certain years where they use certain methods to build these homes. And the fifth one would be the windows, right? That's a costly item that, you know, is a part of the envelope of your home, right? That allows air to come in and leave your home, right? And it also could affect your energy costs. So if you see moisture on the windows, that could indicate that you have poor insulation in your windows during the install, and that should be addressed. Thank you, guys. If you have any questions, you can always feel free to contact me. You can see my information down below.